Hey, so Tim, thanks for joining me. Tim is a friend of mine, and he runs AI Launch Lab. And we've chatted before in the past about all the new things that are going on in AI. So thanks for jumping on. I know you're busy, and there's been a lot that's been going on this week, and I kind of wanted to pick your brain about to get an insider's view of what's happening on the AI side.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on, Sheldon. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so we chatted before, and you told me, and I didn't know this until you told me, but apparently Google just released, and correct me if I'm wrong, new benchmarks for a new model for Gemini that's coming out. And when we last spoke, it hadn't come out yet. So is it out now? Like, what's going on? Like, why are people buzzing about the new benchmarks?
Yeah, well, it's out. I mean, I guess not, it's not available publicly. Some people have early access to it, and they've been showing what they've been able to do. It's at first glance, it looks like it's the big one in the way that GPT-5 wasn't. There was a lot of expectations for that, even hyped up by Sam Altman more. I think just before that was released, he posted a photo of like the rebels and the Death Star, and it was like some sort of analogy that OpenAI was the rebels and
Was he
Google
was
was
he
the Death
was he
Star.
trying to get sued by Disney? Was that what the goal was?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they don't seem to be that worried about it based on what you can do with GPT-5. I don't know if they've curtailed some of that, but yeah. So that was like a huge hype. There's so much hype behind that, and then when it came out, it was kind of like, oh, this is actually not the step change or the big one. But it looks like Gemini 3 is more the big one relative
So
to what expectations are or
So
were.
I thought I don't know I was based on your advice. I ended up paying for ChatGPT, and when 5 came out, I thought it was a step up. Like I saw like the changes. I saw how it gave us more options in terms of switching between modes and everything. I saw a couple of subtle changes, but they were nice, like quality of life changes. So I was pretty happy with like 5. Like, how come people didn't think it was such a big deal, or how come people were unhappy with the rollout?
Well, I mean, they botched the rollout in a number of ways. I think it just wasn't working initially. They have this uh, model picker that was supposed to be one of the big features, and initially it wasn't working. And I think just in general, people were expecting this to be like a huge jump of capabilities, more like GPT 3 to 4 or 3.5 to 4 or whatever, where it was like suddenly this does things that it wasn't able to do before, and it's people are like genuinely impressed with everything, and it was more incremental relative to the expectations. So I in my usage, I find it is better, right? Just in terms of like, do I use it more and consistently versus the previous models? I definitely do. So I think, given OpenAI's market share with ChatGPT, which is just vast, I don't know if it's like 80% or something like that, relative to the other models, maybe even higher. That I think that was enough for them, but Gemini 3 seems to, in a lot of metrics, be just jumping ahead, and it I don't know if that hurts OpenAI, from a competitive capacity, because Google still, it's mostly just technical people using Gemini. They don't have that mass market adoption that OpenAI has.
So
But it really just pushes things forward in a way that everyone has to catch up.
So that's the sense I get, right? Like when I talk to like people who are outside the industry, like people who are just in my personal, my private life, when I ask them about ChatGPT, they understand that, oh, I need to go to chatgpt.com or I need to go to OpenAI and sign in, and then there's an interface and all that stuff. When I talk to people about Gemini, they only really, the average person seems to only really interact with it when they're typing something in Google and they see it as that annoying AI thing that pops up. I don't know actually, I don't know of anybody outside of tech who actually has gone to aistudio.google.com and actually interacted with the AI studio, actually used like the kind of interface for like Nano Banana or like Gemini, or actually done that sort of thing, unless they're kind of like in the know and a little bit more on that side. So like, do you think that this new model, like, yes, I can understand that the benchmarks look impressive from a technical aspect, but do you think this is going to move the needle for them in terms of their business and getting more people to actually use it over ChatGPT?
Uh, I don't think so. I mean, they're going to push it throughout their ecosystem,
Yeah,
as I guess they're already about to do with search and other apps. But yeah, I don't see them solving that problem. They would have to be quite a bit better that to make people realize like, oh, maybe I should make the effort to figure out how to use Gemini, because I saw somebody posted something and it's so much better than GPT-5 that it kind of overcomes that hurdle. I don't think Google's doing a good job in terms of making it easy to access. um, but it's if they keep racing ahead like this, that puts them in the right spot. But I don't know. I think OpenAI has created such a gulf with everyone else in terms of mind share, in terms of
yeah,
just ease of use, the user interface. I mean, it's nothing. It's just an app that's easy to use, but like they have the
yeah,
downloads, and
yeah.
I don't think people would even know if just talking. If somebody's like, "What is that?" They wouldn't even know what to search for, how to find. There's too many places to go. As you said, there's AI Studio, there's Gemini. Like, what do I search for Gemini? What does that bring me? Like, it's not necessarily going to bring you to the one place that you need to be to use it, to get all the capabilities, right? So,
I think that's exactly it, right? Like in the average and again, this is all colloquial conversations and just in my personal life, but when I talk to people about ChatGPT, it's like there's a tangibility in their head. They're like, I know what ChatGPT is, I know how to interface with it. Like to your point, it's a single place, it's a single point. Um, when Gemini comes up, I think it's a little bit too uh, abstract in a lot of ways because Google is doing that thing where they're trying to fit it into everything, right? But funny enough, right? Like when I talk to people who use any kind of Microsoft suite, so a lot of our clients are Microsoft houses. They use Teams, they use Office 365, and they seem to understand that Copilot is built into everything. Whether they like it or not, they know how to interact with Copilot, and Copilot seems a little bit closer to what Gemini is doing, where it's integrated in the entire Microsoft suite. So where does Google stand on that? And like, how does the new model compare with things like Copilot when it comes to those benchmarks and those metrics? Because ChatGPT is kind of just like LLM, but Copilot seems to do more, and Gemini seems to be similar, where it's trying to do a lot more things.
yeah, I mean, they're all multimodal at this point, but in terms of the apps that it's being integrated in, obviously OpenAI doesn't have Google, suite of apps, or Microsoft suite of apps. Copilot is, in terms of the capabilities, it's nowhere close to the leaders. So
Oh, really?
it's unfortunate that many people. It seems like most people that I talk to who are like have an office job, like they've used Copilot just because Microsoft shoves it in your face.
Yeah.
But then they have this kind of impression of what AI tools can do that is way worse than actually the cutting edge is. Um, so in that respect, yeah, Microsoft has this moat where people are using their apps, and therefore, people aren't going to be able to switch to another model. But in terms of capabilities, they're quite far behind. Gemini is definitely the clear leader. I mean, we'll see. I guess once it becomes public next week, will there be more issues? I mean, I think that one of the um, not, I mean, I guess it's a disappointment is that it still hallucinates quite a lot. I think that on the benchmarks, they haven't really improved much on that with regards to that. But in terms of the demos that people have been showing, that Google's shown, but also some of the people who have early access, it is really impressive. It's just like a prompt to create a website that shows a visualization of some physics problem, and boom, one shot, it's done, and it's like a usable thing seemingly. um it's not perfect, like you still need to. I think the good thing is that it's not in a place where it makes it so that you don't have to verify, or that you don't have to know what you're doing and then understand if it makes some errors, or kind of hallucinates, or whatever. So that's good for people who who are worried about being replaced. But in terms of like the acceleration of being able to do work, I mean, just everything it seems that Google has put forward with this model is the vibe coding aspect of it, that you're just kind of prompting, and it's creating real software for you, without you necessarily needing to understand software engineering. Again, these are kind of basic things that it's creating, I think, for the most part, but basic in terms of like, you're not coding something very complex, but well, actually, that's debatable. I guess maybe the idea of what's complex and what's not is always changing, but it's doing this in a very impressive way that it was not possible before.
So then, in terms of like their philosophy, right? Because like when I again, just because I guess we work with these tools on a regular basis, like we understand that Google's AI can be kind of subcategorized. You have Nano Banana that's going up against things like Sora, going up against things like Midjourney. You have like the Gemini chat, which I guess is like their LLM that's going up against things like ChatGPT. You also have their predictive algorithms and their ad platforms that we like. So their PMAX would be up against like Advantage Plus for Meta, for example. And then now with the, I think I forget what their coding part is called. I've always just called it AI Studio, but I know it has a specific name for their coding. But I guess that'll be going up against Claude. I hate saying Claude. It'd be going up against Claude and going up against the, I forget what the OpenAI coding codex or whatever it is.
Right.
So what is Google trying to achieve with their AI, right? Like other than just competing for the sake of competing. I know that on one level they need to keep up in terms of the tech. There's a bit of a business question of why that is. But then I know that from a business standpoint, that ChatGPT represents a real threat to their search business, which is still, I think, something ridiculous like 80% of the revenue. So how are they tying all this together from between the tech and the business side? Like, what are you seeing on your side? What is their philosophy? What are they trying to achieve?
Yeah, that's the story that they tell investors, I guess, is that don't worry about search, that that's not going away, and we're not going to have lower margins there, and um, we're just going to incrementally keep adding AI features to search and to our entire ecosystem in a way that is margin accretive, rather than um, the story that investors were afraid of before, which is they're just going to be disrupted by uh, ChatGPT, and people are not going to search anymore, which actually is being shown in search numbers. They're actually going down, not in terms of overall searches, but in terms of share, because people are using ChatGPT more, not more than search, but they're using it increasingly more, which is cutting into overall searches that people are doing. In terms of like, what are they trying to accomplish? Yeah, I think it's both the defensive and the offensive. I think they were forced to kind of race ahead from a defensive position because OpenAI just came in and stole so much of the perception of what, if you want to use AI, then it was use ChatGPT,
Yeah.
even though Google has been, kind of a leader in this for, a decade. And OpenAI was just kind of like doing some research, behind closed doors until they started to release GPT. I mean, people were using it who were like nerds who knew about what was being what OpenAI was doing, but it wasn't, you know, a mass market thing until ChatGPT came out. So, you know, for Google has to have this defensive posture of like, we're defending search, we're defending our margins with that product, we're defending our market share, but also AI is this big new opportunity that we're going to capture, and it's going to be a whole new revenue source for us. We're also going to improve all of our products, which is going to make people want to pay more for them. It's going to make more people want to use them. You know, I think I mean, kind of simplistically, the strategy is kind of like that. And, you know, the investors and kind of the ecosystem, or kind of people in the industry, were thinking like Google is kind of in trouble. And then only in the last few months does it look like actually, no, all of this that Google has that should give them an advantage is actually now really showing. You know, they're kind of looked at as the only vertically integrated AI player. You know, they do their own chips, their TPUs, tensor processing units, I think is what they're called. You know, other companies do that, but Google's been doing it the longest. I think every one of their kind of LLM models for the last, you know, almost 10 years has been done using their own chips that they design themselves. You know, they have
So basically, they don't have to fight for NVIDIA chips like everybody else. Essentially, that's one of their
true,
moats.
yeah. Although, you know, in that regard, the moat that NVIDIA has is also one of the supply chain. So NVIDIA kind of like just made deals with Taiwan Semiconductor and others to just lock in their production for years ahead. So Google, yes, they can get some because they're also big and they've also been buying, you know, buying into the supply chain, but it's nowhere close to NVIDIA in terms of numbers of chips, in terms of, you know, Google, you can use TPUs also if you're like, you know, I don't want to use NVIDIA. You can use on Google Cloud, or I forget what they call it, but the problem is there's also the software mode that NVIDIA has with CUDA and the whole ecosystem surrounding that. So it's still kind of, it's very difficult. Only if you got to kind of be like a very big player that has a real incentive financially, that, you know, it's worth it for us to invest in that ecosystem and to build everything kind of bespoke for Google's platform, rather than just, you know, using the industry leader, the industry norm, the industry standard. So I don't know if there's any other major players actually using TPUs to train their models. Could be that I'm just not aware of it, but I don't think so. I think like OpenAI is doing their own chip, but they're still largely using NVIDIA. It's kind of like, it's being thought of as like, this is a way to differentiate. Maybe it's a way we can get ahead if we do our, you know, if we vertically integrate. But like, I don't think anyone other than Google is in a place where they're able to kind of just do everything in-house. I mean, in-house outside of having, you know, the Taiwan Semiconductor produce the chips and using the chip supply chain. But like everything other than that, nobody other than Google is doing it. I mean, well, NVIDIA and then Google, and NVIDIA is just still the standard that people can't really avoid unless you're,
Yeah, that's it, right?
yeah.
Like that. It seems like, to your point, right? It's almost like two completely different markets where Google has been able to do entirely their own thing, and they're betting against what everybody else is doing. And then you kind of have to make a decision of like which side you want to fall on. And like a lot of the talk I've seen recently, and I know what I'm actually curious to see what your thoughts are about this, but everybody now is talking about how AI is a big bubble, and there's been this like I don't know who started documenting it, but they started outlining like where the investments are kind of going, and it's just like a self-feeding circle essentially with Nvidia in the middle. that's like propping up these AI companies just so that they can raise their valuation, get investors so that they can buy more Nvidia chips. And everybody's talking about how this is not sustainable. And to your point, it seems like um, Google is not part of that at all. Like they stand apart, right? If I'm not mistaken, like they're not part of this whole like weird incestuous like investor group. So if that whole thing collapses, is that the edge that Google would need to be able to jump ahead while everybody's trying to scramble to figure out how to deal with this collapse? Like Google will be unaffected by it?
Okay, well, first I would say that I don't believe in the bubble narrative. I mean, in the sense that, like, I mean, so bubble versus boom is kind of the thing that needs to be delineated.
Right.
Um, in every major boom, some new industry or some new technology that's actually like being adopted at this scale, there will be some
Winners and
investment
losers.
ahead of the user demand, the end user demand.
Okay.
So the question is like, okay, how far ahead of the demand is it, and how risky are these investments relative to waiting for that demand to kind of pay for the investment, right? So that's the that's where we're at in terms of like, Nvidia and everyone else is saying we believe strongly that in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, that with inference, which is basically the usage of these tools versus the training of the models, that the demand will be so much more than it is today. And that's why we're increasing production of our chips. That's why we're building all these data centers. We're getting all this energy infrastructure to power the data centers. And, that's why there's, I don't forget, is it $1 or $1.5 trillion of deals that OpenAI has made with other companies, Oracle, Nvidia, et cetera, Microsoft, and others. Although it did come out just a couple of days ago that in Microsoft's earnings report that there's no guarantee, like that deal is not like finalized yet. So they
Because
could walk
Microsoft
away.
seems to be, yeah, because Microsoft seems to be trying to play both sides, right? Like
Oh, sorry,
they're
not
the big.
Microsoft, Nvidia.
Oh,
Nvidia's
Nvidia. Okay, because
yeah.
Microsoft is like heavily invested famously in OpenAI, but then they've also been developing their own thing. It's almost like they just wanted to pay off OpenAI to hedge their bets while they work on their own thing. So
Yeah, they're
this is
trying to
where,
play both sides. Yeah.
yeah. So this is what I mean, right? Like, and like the AI adoption stuff. It's like, yes, people are paying for this a little bit, but it seems like at least from the pricing that I see, a lot of it is kind of a race to the bottom. Like I don't see anybody paying tens of thousands of dollars for an AI tool. Like I see people paying like $10 here, $5 here type of thing.
I
So is
mean,
that
some people are, and for some people it's worth it for them. If you can, I mean, there's the pro tier, but then there's also usage for some of these models beyond that. So, um, yeah, I mean, it depends what your use case is. If you're like using it at scale within your company, like you're paying a lot of money to these companies, right? So if you're an individual, you still can pay a ton of money, but it's you have to be a power user, right? It has to be something that's like for your business or an income generating thing. You're not just kind of doing it. Oh, I got a job and therefore like I'm using this to the tune of thousands of dollars. But I think that the you know
you
the
think the
the
use case is there to justify like you said, right? Like I can understand how maybe some of the investment is a little bit ahead of the demand, but you think the demand is going to catch up at one point, or do you think it's just gonna the investment is just going to drop off, and when we talk about the bubble, it's that space that is going to collapse.
well, there's no sign that the investments are slowing. In fact, they're accelerating. Um, it's every couple of days there's a new announcement, whether it's some big AI startup just raised another several $1 billion at a multi-deca-billion-dollar valuation or
Valuation.
more. I think the recent one was Thinking Machines, which is Mira Murati, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, that left
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
know that name.
they
Yeah.
just had I forget what their valuation was. Jeff Bezos, it came out that he started a new AI company that he's going to be co-CEO of called Prometheus Labs, I think.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be focused on manufacturing and some other domains, but I think the amount of investment or the valuation there was 6.2 billion. I mean, it's just these numbers are those like though it's just like every week there's another one, right? Um, and we already talked about the trillions of dollars in deals that may or may not pan out that OpenAI has done. Elon Musk is talking about doing 100 gigawatts. I mean, these are pie in the sky kind of thing. There's nothing, concrete there, but like they just announced a deal for 500 megawatts, which is half a gigawatt in the Middle East. I don't know if it was, I forget where in the UAE they're doing a deal there. Um, but anyway, these deals are just like, there's just more and more deals. And anytime one of these companies wants to borrow money or issue equity, just there's just overwhelming demand.
But
Um,
isn't that just feeding the narrative that this is like we're still in the bubble and like do you think that these investments are going to pan out or and like there's going to be a justification for all this built-in infrastructure or do you think that this is just kind of like the industry propping itself up and it's
well,
gonna implode?
as of now, like the demand is higher than the supply in terms of like
Oh,
if
okay.
you're using ChatGPT,
Sure.
they are. I don't know if they're still doing it, but like even up to a month ago, they would be throttling people. Like it would be slow to use it during the day because there's so much demand. So we're
Is that
not.
free demand though? Like, or are you
That's
saying like there was enough people paying? Because like when I was looking at it, I understood that the numbers were that the people who are actually paying to use these tools is still a fraction of what it needs to be for it to actually justify the infrastructure and the build out and all the investment that's going into it.
yeah. I think. I mean, that's obviously a debate. Are they judging that correctly? I mean, anytime some new tech comes out and you want to get it in front of billions of people, those companies are going to have it be cheap or free initially, and then they'll kind of rope you in over time. Facebook famously said like, "Well, what was the quote? I was basically like, we'll figure it out later in terms of monetization." I mean, they were saying that for years, and many years even after they were already into the I think hundreds of millions or maybe even billions of users. They hadn't even figured out monetization yet, and Zuckerberg was not even worried about it, and investors were fine with it, until um, until they turned it on, and suddenly they were a cash cow, right? So I think OpenAI is in that place. Certainly there's going to be some other competitors that might not be able to turn on the revenue spigot in a way that OpenAI, I think, can. Um, but I mean, the question again, it's like, how far ahead are they? As I said, like right now, the usage is there in terms of whether it's free or paid
Right.
users. Is the value there that if they suddenly said actually, more and more of the features are going to be paid and you don't get access to them unless you pay us a $20 subscription or more. Um, I think we're kind of in that period of like where people are starting to see the value. Like personally, up until this year, it was kind of just a toy.
Right.
Now I use it for almost everything I do work wise because it's just that it provides that much value. $20 is a bargain. Like when I first signed up for it, I'm like, oh, I don't want to pay $20, and it's another $20 that I'm subscribing for. But if they were to, say suddenly now it's going to be, for GPT-6 or whatever I guess they've just released 5.1, I think, that going forward, like it's going to be $50 a month. I mean, I would pay $50 a month because it provides that value. Would I pay $100 a month? I mean, I would, I'd think about it, but like the question is how much more productivity does it create for me? How much more quickly can I do my work? And for me, it's a huge benefit. I mean, it's like, something that I would do that would take me weeks. It's literally, I can do that in a couple of hours and then just do editing. And I think we're seeing that story is playing out for more and more people and more domains. It's not there for all this domain, for every domain for sure. Um, but as I think we just are seeing with the release of Gemini 3, the capabilities still continue to be improving at a rate that I think will, kind of blow open the doors on more domains. Okay, now this industry, it's suddenly value accretive, it's worth paying for. I don't think they're anywhere close to kind of having turned the dial up on monetization to where they ultimately will be able to. For companies like Google and Microsoft, it's a question of competitive dynamics. Like if they don't do it, then you would maybe switch to, oh, maybe I'll use Google's apps instead of Microsoft because they're so much better in terms of generative AI, in terms of, oh, I want to make a slideshow, and Gemini and Google Slides will do it better than, say, PowerPoint, or vice versa. So like they're kind of in a position where it's like we have to invest in this,
Mhm.
whether or not it's adding revenue to us, whether or not it's like, it's a
Well,
question.
yeah, that's the defensive thing that you're talking about. It's like
Yeah,
everybody else is doing, you have to come to the table.
exactly. So I think that a lot of the players, and whether we're talking about big tech or the Fortune 500, just big companies in general,
Like the
it's
blue
like
chip, like
it's a
old school
question of
guys.
like we have to do this, because
Yep.
if we're not leading relative to our competitors, this could be, and so that's a bit of FOMO. Like, is it actually creating value? There's differing perspectives and studies as that, actually it's not creating value, or in these areas it is creating value. Um, so in that respect, you could say yes, it's a bubble because the value isn't yet there in many cases, and the investment is there ahead of that value. Um, but I don't think I think the story that's being told of this is a bubble that could the question is like, how what would suddenly turn it from, okay, investments, all of the, what's it like, just no holding back, like let's just invest as fast as possible, versus like, oh shoot, like let's stop this.
Well, so
um
so I think like you bring up a good point, right? Like that when you look at how the tech companies have operated in the past, they have that adoption first, and then to your point, once they turn on the monetization feature, traditionally ads, like realistically, and once they turn on the ads feature, it's like it's like drinking from a fire hose, and all of a sudden, like everybody who's used to using it for free just sticks to the free model, and um, advertisers like us are just willing to pay for those eyeballs, essentially. I think that the reason a lot of people are talking about it being a bubble is that kind of incestuous diagram of like companies essentially investing in themselves and propping it up to make it seem like there's more activity than there actually is to attract those people outside of that circle. And then it's almost like a game of musical chairs about who's going to be left holding the bag when all of the like when that internal investment collapses.
Yeah, that's so it's so that story of this, as you were saying, incestuous kind of investment uh triangle. I mean, like, it's like Nvidia makes the chips, and then here's the company CoreWeave that buys the chips and has the data centers, or actually they're not, they're increasingly like have deals with other companies like Core Scientific for the data centers, and then Nvidia's then invest. So CoreWeave is paying the money, Nvidia is sending money back into
Yeah,
the form of
exactly.
investment, and
Yeah.
I forget the third part of that stool, but
But
there is that.
it looks like an accounting trick where it's like, yeah, look at our revenue without looking deeper to say like, but this percentage of our revenue is actually just coming from a company that we invested in and gave them money to buy from us. You know what I mean? It looks like
Yeah,
that sort of
but
sketchy book.
the end user demand is there though. So um, CoreWeave, if you want to, if you want to run something on their servers at their data centers, it's not like they have space just waiting. Sometimes there's delays, but it's delays of capacity. It's not delays
Demand.
of like we can't find customers. Okay, what are the margins going to be? Maybe they'll have to drop prices. And there's this kind of like, because it's moving pieces and like, okay, supply versus demand. Are you always in balance? Not necessarily, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I think up to now, there hasn't been this big gulf where there's these big data center companies that are just building and building, and then once they come
No one's
online,
coming.
there's nobody filling that demand. We haven't seen that yet. If that does actually happen, then that would be an eye opener, and it would probably cause these stocks to drop in a big way. But up to now, like the story of like the some issues. So CoreWeave is one of the um, I guess considered to be like a weaker link in this whole thing because um, they're kind of really dependent on Nvidia giving access to the chips, and then also Nvidia is investing in them, and so that whole thing is it being propped up in an artificial way. But the issues that they ran into was on the supply side. They're trying to bring on data centers as fast as possible, and their partner Core Scientific wasn't able to actually bring them on as quick as they were supposed to. So it's more of um, delivering or execution rather than we actually don't have demand for for building so
Okay,
far.
well, I think that's the first time I've heard that argument, right? That like as long as the data centers are at 100 plus capacity, 100% plus capacity, and there's constant demand coming to them, then it's sustainable and it's proof that the demand is out there. So then the question is twofold, right? Like one, I think is the demand, uh, are the margins going to be there to pay for this infrastructure? I think that's one of the questions that's on people's mind. And then to me, the other question is right now, I think the demand is there because these tools are free, they're shiny, they're fun, they're new, but do they have staying power? Like the Sora app, for example, that released recently, where it's essentially TikTok, but it's all AI generated video. There's an argument to be made on one side that there's an artistry here that you have to be creative to really push what you can come up with, and like your imagination now is like really the limiting factor, and there's a lot of fun to be had. And then the other side of it is just this is an app that's literally just AI slop, and nobody really wants to see that, and people are going towards. So there's arguments being made on both sides. So what do you think is going to happen? Like, do you think the demand is going to continue? Is this really a turning point where we're seeing the evolution of like a whole new thing, or is this a flash in the pan and is going to disappear and then demand goes down with the whole thing collapses?
Yeah, I guess there is the unfortunate thing that some of these companies don't have. They don't seem to have taste in terms of what they put out there. Um, I mean, I do think that social media will be disrupted by these AI tools, and I think that's why
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that already. Yeah.
that's why Meta and OpenAI, and I'm not sure if anyone else has come out with these like AI slot feed apps that I doubt are going to actually stick. And I don't think beyond just let me check this out. I don't think it's
I
really.
downloaded it. I was like, oh, there's some fun stuff here, but honestly, like I think I've opened it 3 times or something when I was really, really just like very curious to see what was there. And
Yeah.
I don't see myself keeping it. I'm probably gonna uninstall it by like next.
However, if you go to Instagram, I think there's some research showing that a huge amount of the content there is now AI generated.
Yeah,
Um,
that
you know,
that definitely we're
so
seeing. Like
so this is
we're guilty of that too, right? Like we're definitely like if you follow our social media feed, we use AI mixed in with real stuff constantly, and like there's like a balance and mix, and even from the ad agency side, some of our clients it doesn't make sense. Like when it has to be a real product, it has to be a real product. But honestly, for some of our service clients, who cares? Like it's the same as like going to a stock video market and just paying for or downloading a stock video that was shot by a real person. We might as well just generate it and have it be exactly the thing that we want to show, and then just superimpose the logo and superimpose the text on it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. So these other companies, Meta defensively because they have Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp, and OpenAI offensively as like, we're gonna get into social media in to some extent, is based on the idea that actually the content is going to be AI generated. Like very little of the content is going to be human made, and therefore you need to be the platform that has all the best AI content, and you need to be making it easy for people to make that AI content, and and also to consume it. Um, so I think that's that's the intent there with these AI slop apps. That they're just trying to like get ahead of that, or they're trying to, kind of plant their flag and say like, we have something and we're going to keep working at it.
So again,
Um,
I don't think that that is a recipe to have staying power, right? Like it might make sense under very specific things, but I don't know that there's that many people who want to subject themselves to AI slop constantly. I
oh
think
well, no, but that's not true because Instagram, you're getting AI slop whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not.
well,
So yes, I'm not going to intentionally go and only see AI slop. Um,
you're saying it's
but what
unavoidable.
I want is it. I want to. I mean, people. If you ask them, they probably don't want it. But like, if I go onto Instagram and I can't tell the difference, that's the thing, right? Like, there's a lot of influencers, quote unquote, like influencers or like profiles that it's like completely AI. Like the
Yeah.
person is AI. Like everything is AI, right?
I, don't get
And
me
it's
wrong.
like it's on.
I might also be like, even though you and I are like the exact same age, I'm like an old man. Like I don't actually spend that much time on Instagram unless it's for work. I don't like scroll endlessly on Instagram.
Right, but so that's in terms of like where are people spending their time, it's like on apps like Instagram and TikTok and I guess also like WhatsApp, like those types of chat apps, right? And increasingly that content is um AI. I don't think there's no turning back on that. So in terms of like, what are these apps in terms of like I forget the what's the name of the OpenAI one, like
Oh, I
that's
have no idea.
it's irrelevant in terms of like, that's not really where the demand for the data centers is coming from. They're trying to build that as being like an extra thing, and eventually it'll be a bigger thing, from their perspective. But right now it's just like people using ChatGPT, right? That's the main use case for AI, and that's the demand is like, crazy for that. Um, and that's why OpenAI is racing ahead. I mean, yes, some of it is like kind of, oh, we think 2030, or we think the demand will be X by that year. But some of it is just we can't keep up. Like our servers are getting are like burning to the ground, in a sense, because like there's so much demand.
So,
Um,
so that's on the OpenAI side. So then that raises the question with Gemini, right? With this new model, with the new benchmarks, is it more power hungry? And then add on top of that the layer that Google has its own closed infrastructure. Are they running into the same problems as, call it, the rest of the ecosystem where it comes to the demand server side?
uh, I don't. I haven't listened to their earnings calls. I don't know if they've talked about that, but I think that that's probably one of the reasons why they have. I mean, it's also just, is it ready? Is it actually good enough? But I mean, I think one of the reasons probably why they haven't just implemented AI in all the places that they've already announced, like I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year. They're always talking about this is coming and it's going to be throughout our whole suite, and then
Yeah.
there's like you wait for 6 months and it's still not there. Um, part of it, I think, is just they don't have the GPUs, they don't have the TPUs, or they don't have
The
that
hardware
capacity to make
processing
it
power. Yeah.
available to everyone. Um, but probably the bigger reason is just the capabilities are not in a place where they're able to put it out. So it's less clear, I guess, with say Microsoft and Google, whereas it's very clear like every time OpenAI had, and not just every time they have a new release, but also just on a weekday, or when people go back to school, suddenly it's slow again because everyone's using it for their assignments and for cheating, right? So it's very clear the demand is there, and OpenAI is by far like they're dominant if you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
that
that.
that
So
that no doubt. Like OpenAI is like the big bad in the room right
yeah,
now.
so if we can see that they're not able to actually keep up, then you can kind of say overall that's the case. I think that's a safe thing to say. Will it be the case in 2026? Will it be the case in 2027 when more capacity comes on? That's anybody's guess. I don't see. So there it becomes a question of, are these tools getting better? Is it going to be the case that people are, is it more of a Studio Ghibli thing that it's just like, oh, this is a fun thing to use, and then I stop using it, versus actually this is keeps to be, it gets still improving. What I'm using it for professionally, what I'm using it for even non-professionally, of just like, oh, I want to tell me how to cook this thing, or like I want to send an email to my, you know, family member that I don't want to think about, and just, do it for me, or like make it nicer, or whatever it is. People are using it for stuff like that, right? Like, um, or I want to have a therapist that I don't want to pay for. So I think that's the number one use case based on some research.
Oh,
Um,
really? That's
uh,
crazy.
yeah, so those things, it's just a question of like, is it good enough? Is it getting better? And I
Mhm.
think with Gemini, we see that that's still the case. And then also, what did they say? I mean, they're incentivized to kind of keep the party going, but like they're saying that actually there's no wall in terms of pre-training and post-training. That actually
What
they
does that mean?
well, it's a little bit above my level of understanding in terms of what exactly they're saying. I'd have to look into it a little bit more in terms of what specifically they did. I did read some posts about it though, in terms of some not necessarily novel things, but in terms of like how they managed to make their model better. They talked about it in some tweets on X. Some of the developers, and I guess the overall picture that they're claiming, at least, is that no, like there's no ceiling yet in terms of that, and actually there's so much more that they can do to keep improving the models with regards to pre and post training. And that's been a question in terms of like, the concern, like, actually, no, we've hit a ceiling, and they need to, there needs to be some new innovations in order to kind of keep the cutting edge moving forward.
Is
um
that what people were talking about? I remember this a few months ago, where the idea is that these companies are running out of training data essentially, and we're hitting a bit of a wall because, well, what they were doing before was they were just going out in the open web and just collecting every user piece of user generated data they could. And I think the theory is that because now we're going into like what's that theory called, the dead internet theory, where
mhm.
everything is just AI slop everywhere. All content is now, or most content is no longer generated by people; it's generated by machines. So you can't train the machines on its own thing, and then that's where the wall is. You're saying that that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, or are you talking about something different?
So data and synthetic data, like, is that going to work? Is it going to, is that going to cause problems? I think that's still unclear. I don't think there's been any news on that front, or any kind of conclusions on that front. Definitely all the big players are talking about synthetic data as like, yeah, that's the thing now slash into the future that's going to keep things going. um, I Outside of people who've just kind of been asserting that this is going to be a problem, which it seems logical.
Right.
um, if you're, you know creating this data with AI, um, is it going to be as useful as the human data? you know I think in practice we don't know, because I don't think that um, the companies have talked too closely. I mean, they don't talk about what's in their training data.
Yeah,
when,
of course.
when Gemini comes out with Gemini 3, they're not like, here's the database. Like, it's all proprietary. Like, they don't want to talk about it. So we don't really know. Is it working? are they already majority synthetic data? I don't think we know that. It's possible. I'm not aware, but I don't think we know. So
Okay.
that's
So
kind
training
kind of
data aside, they're saying, at least like to investors and to the outside public, they're saying that no, that ceiling doesn't exist, or at least they haven't hit it yet, and they don't think they're going to hit it anytime soon.
exactly
Okay.
and publicly they're saying no, this is the future and it's great, and look at all the synthetic data we're
Well,
able
yeah,
to
they have to.
create
That's the
now.
problem with their stock.
Like Nvidia's presentations, Jensen Huang, like he talks, and look at how we're training robots, and we don't even need to have them. Like there's all this synthetic data they're trained on before they even start,
Okay.
testing in the real world, right? Um, so I mean, that use case has already been there, and it seems like it's working because the capabilities, at least in terms of demos, keeps improving. So I don't think there's any reason to believe beyond it seems logical that this might be problematic.
Yeah.
And some smart people, some technical people have asserted that, but I don't think in practice we've seen any reason to believe that that's true or that it's imminent.
Interesting.
Um,
No.
so just like DeepSeek was another one. Oh my God! Like, look, they managed to like do these models without having access to GPUs at the same scale, and therefore the demand won't be there. And then on the other side, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and Jensen Huang of Nvidia are like, no, like that's just going to create more demand if you make this, if you make the capabilities cheaper or easier to get to, then it means that suddenly the demand will be more, not less. And I think that's so far that argument. I don't think has been. I don't think there's any reason to believe that that's not true.
Okay.
Um, so, all of the stories about the bubble, I think that the most, the ones that are the most salient or that make the most sense to me are more on the investment side. Like Oracle is borrowing tons of money, and previously these companies were just using their cash flow, right?
Okay.
So this is a question like, are is there going to be is there going to be some sort of panic that suddenly investors will pull back, and then that kind of creates a stop the the music stops, and in the kind of musical chairs game. But so far I don't think there's any sign of that. And as long as we keep seeing improvements in the capabilities with new models, as long as we keep seeing investor appetite be there, as long as we see the demand be there in the data centers, this keeps going.
Yeah,
So
and that's an interesting point that you brought up. Like I said, I don't think I've heard anybody else analyze it from like connecting those dots, right? Where they're still building data centers desperately to catch up to the existing demand. But the moment they get to a point where, oh, we're building data centers and there's not enough demand, I think that's an interesting point that you brought up, that would change the narrative, that would flip things. And at that point, that could cause a bit of panic because then people start questioning, like, okay, is there going to be enough demand to justify all of this investment?
exactly. And one additional thing there, you could say, well, OpenAI is kind of creating artificial demand by making this free or like really cheap, and therefore people are just playing around with it, right? Or
Yeah, but
companies are just trying this out just because they're
yeah,
afraid of falling behind.
but
I
there's
think we
historic
I think we've
precedents.
gone through some of these cycles already, though, where
Hmm.
a new model comes out, people get excited, and then they stop using it, right? Or companies invest and then they realize, oh, actually, the ROI, the return on investment, wasn't there for us, so we're stopping. I mean, we've already seen this in previous years, so I think we've already kind of overcome that.
Then
Maybe the next one is going to be the big one in terms of like actually they really stop. But again, like I don't I think that it's like a healthy thing. It's actually good in a sense that people are so skeptical because it's kind of curtailing things from getting too out there from an investment perspective or evaluation perspective. I mean, OpenAI. I think there's been some rumors of like maybe at some point they'll do a trillion dollar IPO, and then Sam Altman like says no, we're not planning on that. But I think they got to kind of keep keep that out there so that private investors are like, oh, that's the prize, right? There's going to be this thing at the end of the rainbow, so let's keep giving them tens of billions of dollars. um so there is a little bit of that. Like if you're some really renowned researcher, and you get a few more researchers to join you, and then suddenly you get $100 million or multi-billion-dollar investment, on the basis of the story that you tell, and where what you plan to build. That's a little bit of a frothy, I guess, in a sense, but it's really nothing like what was in the .com era, um, where it was just really, I mean, I won't say easy, but like the valuations there were just on another level.
Yeah,
Like now, if you
they
look at,
were, but that the dot-com bubble was a good example of where, and again, this is going way back before a lot of the modern kind of economic or financial models that we have today that we take for granted came to fruition, right? So at the time, the belief was, well, there's all this demand, we'll figure out how to make money from it later on. Um, and that never came to fruition, and then people panicked, and then that's what caused everything to collapse. Fast forward, this is what, 25 years later, and today, ads, right? So like the easy answer would be, if ChatGPT offered some sort of ad platform tomorrow, I know for sure my guys are clamoring to get on top of that right now. Like if there's an opportunity to jump on some sort of ChatGPT ad platform, like we are gonna 100% jump on that. If they don't go that route, then that's the question of like, is there enough? Are there enough people that are willing to pay a high enough price to justify the amount of energy, the investment in the infrastructure? And it's not like a railroad system, right? Like you can have a railroad sit around for like 5 years unused, and then all of a sudden, okay, we're going to open up this train line. Like these chips have a very short, finite, practical lifespan for them to make money off of. Like that's where like the math, I'm like, I like when you start getting into the nuances of that math, I think that's where there's a bit of an argument to say maybe not a bubble, but an overvaluation.
I think, well, I don't necessarily know that it's true that there is that big difference between the railroad analogy. Um, in practice, I think we've seen that GPUs that are previous generation, or even the one before that, are still in use. Um, yes, there is, like some chips just they reach end of life, or they they get fried or whatever it is. That does happen, but I
Well,
think
these
in
things do get
aggregate,
fun, right?
uh,
Like I in a previous life, I worked in IT for like 15 years. Like I know, practically speaking, that this hardware, you have that much power running through it, like these chips do fry themselves. Even Google, the way that
oh
Google
yeah, yeah,
sets
yeah.
up their infrastructure, they plan on X amount of chips and hardware and hard drives failing every single quarter
Sure,
or
sure.
year.
But the chips are one part of the infrastructure, right? There's so many other layers to it. So it's not exactly the same, but it's like, oh yeah, you have to do maintenance on a rail on a on a railroad as well, right? There is damage, there is shifting over time. I don't know how it works, but is it more expensive on the data center side in terms of what needs to be replaced? I would assume that's the case for sure. Um, but I don't think the analogy doesn't fit because of that. I think that like it is quite similar in a sense that yes, you're building this out, and yeah, you can't use the same equipment for like 50 years, because there's going to be a lot that would need to be changed, or maybe even 10 years. A bunch of it would need to be replaced, in a way that maybe railroads don't require
Well,
that
that's the
to
thing,
that
right?
extent.
The majority of the cost of building out a data center is the chips, and like those chips are constantly
I
having to
don't
be
think that's the
replaced
case.
every year.
I don't know that number, but I don't think that's the case. I think I I I think it's a large portion of it. Um, but I mean, increasingly, the big problem is that there's not enough transform. I mean, this is not even a new story. This is an old story now. It's like it's just it's getting the data center powered is the bottleneck. Like it's not even the chips that are like the big draw, and so I don't think that, and you could say that just adds to your case of like this is another uh, in terms of it can't use it as a railroad, just put the supply there and then wait for the demand. Um, but whether it's more complicated or it's more expensive or, things break down more quickly, I think the analogy holds. Um, and it is where, to some extent, they're betting on that demand being there. And they're building out the railroad version of AI. Um, and that risk is there. The same risk is there. That, like, are you building a railroad to nowhere? Are you building an empty city in China, in some city? The whole story of, like, there were these empty cities, and there was all this talk of
But
bubble in China that,
yeah, but your argument is that this is just a normal part of a boom bust cycle. This is just part of the excitement at the beginning of a whole new market of, long
yeah,
term, that this is your just growing pains.
absolutely. And for sure there will be a quote unquote bubble pop in the way that it happens in every boom. Like in the railroads, there were tons of bubble pops. I mean, the railroad boom, I was looking at some charts from like 18, I don't know if it was like 1810 or something, to like 1920, like 100 years of booms and busts. There were like at least 10 booms and busts in the railroad cycle. Like, it wasn't just one, right? So, like, we're going to have that for sure, probably by the end of this decade. It would make sense. But it's just a question of, like, does that mean it's over? I doubt it. Does it mean like it's going to be like an AI winter in the sense that we've had in the past, where it would be like a multi-decade kind of story of, like, you have this huge amount of investments going into the 60s and 70s, and then you have, I don't know if I'm getting the decades off, but and then you have this kind of AI winter where it's like, actually we were way ahead of the capabilities, and it actually can't do what we said it could do, and then you need to wait for some new research to kind of uh, come out of, like, some other professors, over time. And then it's like, oh, we waited for deep learning, and then deep learning was the next thing, but it took decades for that to kind of be a big deal again, and to bring AI back. I don't think I don't think there's any reason to believe that we're anywhere close to that. It's more of, investments maybe get too hyped, and then, there's the major pullback on the investment side, and then, that
Yeah.
takes a couple of years for it to come back. Um, Maybe that could be the case, but I don't think we're there yet. And there's the fact that there is this continuous skepticism of, like, is it a bubble? Is it a bubble? Um, is more of a sign that, like, actually we're not at that point. The thing is, like, when you're trying to assess bubbles, I sometimes compare, like, you know, we I grew up thinking, like, okay, the paradigm is the dot-com bubble, right? So it'd be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, until your mom is mortgaging their house to buy Nortel stocks, then we're not at the end, right? But with crypto, we didn't get there. With crypto in 2021, the bubble kind of popped,
Yeah.
and it was still a niche thing.
Yeah.
And that's because crypto just wasn't accessible to more people, for a
Yeah.
number of reasons. Crypto was just, they didn't like crypto. Most mainstream people are like, ew. But also, it wasn't easy enough to use. I mean, there's just a lot of reasons, right? Also, politically, like, what does crypto mean to people, is different from AI. I mean, AI is having a big pushback now, also in the data center sense. Like, there's a ton of towns that have, like, voted to kind of curtail investment in data centers. I just saw some reporting recently of people being upset about a Meta data center that's being built out. I forget what they call it, but it's
Oh
the
yeah,
one
there's
that's like the size of Manhattan or whatever that they're building
yeah,
in
yeah.
some town.
People are starting to wise up to the environmental impacts of these data centers, and like that's becoming more and more of a talking point, right? Like when you like I forget, but like when you go on to Sora and you generate a video for fun, how much water is that taking up? How much energy is that taking up? What is the resource use of that? What is the value of that? And people are starting to add that
Mm.
climate piece, like, to these models, and they're starting to recognize that. I know that in the town where my partner and I have a house, right? Like there's a piece of land that was set aside as an um, industrial park, and there was a company that was coming in and wanted to set up a data center, and people actually were educated enough and aware enough to say, like, we don't want this in our neighborhood.
exactly. So there is that backlash, and that will kind of I guess there's a similarity in that sense to crypto, in the sense that politically it has some of the same issues and environmentally, and et cetera. But AI is mainstream. Like regular people are using
Yeah,
AI, are
yeah,
using
I can
AI,
agree with that.
right? So
Yeah,
there's not that same barrier where kind of crypto hit the ceiling, and it was still niche, and whereas the .com was like, people were like, oh, I'm gonna do my own startup, or I'm gonna, regular
yeah,
people were
yeah,
invested in it.
yeah.
I think AI is much more like that, or much more like the railroads, in the sense that like it is, kind of
Ubiquitous,
encompassing
or yeah,
all like every it's not niche at all in the way that crypto is. So this bubble will get really big in a way that I don't think we have hit that peak yet. And then it'll pop, and then it'll get bigger again, and then it'll pop, and it'll get bigger again. But
but the
like I think,
underlying, but the underlying market, the underlying tech, and I agree with that. I don't think the tech is going anywhere for better or for worse. I think it's just staying with us, right? Like the new generations that are growing up with this stuff, they're not even going to know that there is a time, like they're not going to understand how the world functioned before they were able to use AI in their day to day. And I agree, like the adoption, I definitely see it's there. And I agree with you. It's not the same as what we saw in crypto, where crypto people are like, how do I do this? How do I get, like, AI is just, oh, it's just everywhere. I can interact with my Google speaker. I can log into ChatGPT. I see what I'm doing in internet search. I have it on my phone. Like people just have it everywhere now.
yeah. So because of that, like it's still there's the two things that would kind of pop it in the short to medium term, and it's the investment pulling back, and and on the other side it's the well, it's they're both related, but the capabilities are actually not advancing, or the capabilities are not there in the way that people expect, and therefore um just
Like a
across the
million
board the investment stops from that standpoint as well. So I think the most likely scenario would be like, okay, maybe actually OpenAI does IPO, and that's kind of like this culmination point where like there's a fever pitch, and everyone's like, oh my god, and then boom, like just everyone pulls their money out, because they're like, this has got to be the high
That's the
water
peak.
point
Yeah.
at least at this stage, in the sense that crypto peaked when Coinbase IPO'd,
Good.
to the day, I think. So just like these tend to be like, where
Milestones.
investors are like, okay,
Yeah.
like let's
Mhm.
let's pull back, because like this is kind of like a milestone that means that maybe like uh we've hit a short term or medium term peak, and let's just reassess.
So then, last thing, and because we're already coming up on over an hour at this point, um, so if we look at this market in terms of milestones and in terms of capabilities, and we understand a little bit better the lay of the land, in your mind, what is the significance of this new Gemini model? What is the milestone that we're seeing, and how relevant is it to everything that's going on? Is this a game changer, or is this just going to be another like ChatGPT 5 where it's like a lot of hype and then nothing happens with it?
Well, I think so. With regards to comparing it to GPT-5, I think people were disappointed. At least people in the industry were disappointed. But I think in practice, or in what it actually did, was that it just made it more valuable, incrementally for most users. So it maintained, if not, it either maintained or grew usage.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that probably will have the same story with Gemini. I mean, usage is different with regards to people using Gemini, because of the whole market share thing, and ease of use to actually use it, but get access to it. But I think that at a minimum, it's going to do that, at least from what we've seen from the release. And I think there's a decent chance, a good chance that a better than 50-50 chance that the new capabilities, or the improved capabilities, will make it so that um, new groups of people, new kind of industries or sectors, will find value in a way that they didn't before. If these demos are like legitimate, that we're seeing online, that are being posted by people that have access to it, as well as from Google
Good.
itself, um, in terms of vibe coding something, just like a one shot or zero shot prompt, and getting something created that actually is usable. A website, some examples like turn this research paper into an interactive website that can help me learn, and like it seems to do it really well. That's like these are just new use cases that mean that suddenly that demand is there in a way that wasn't there before. And also these are more compute intensive use cases than just a text prompt, right? In terms of like not only, well, actually, I don't know about the hosting side. I don't know how, but in terms of creating these visualizations and creating graphics and creating videos, um, that content is much more compute intensive. So those data centers are going to be running, on overdrive. So I think that's probably going to be the end result of it. Also, what it does is it causes everyone else in the industry to race even faster ahead. It means that all their investors will be more likely to give them more money because they'll see like, oh, look what Google did. We either have to catch up to them defensively, or we have to race ahead, in some other way, or you can build the new thing or whatever. So I think it just, in a way that people say on the investor side, that NVIDIA kind of rescued AI, rescued the economy with their
Mhm.
earnings report yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. It's all a blur. But like NVIDIA kind of came out, and then they beat their earnings estimates and revenue estimates, and the stock was up 5% yesterday and this morning. I think it's down now. So there's still investors pulling back, which is not abnormal, but it did kind of provide this perception that actually we don't have to worry so much. I mean, yes, there's still worry, and maybe there still will be a continued pullback in the markets, but it just means that like NVIDIA is proving with their earnings and with their revenue in this quarter, and with their guidance, that actually like no, there's no pulling back, and it's still full steam ahead in the short term.
So
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 there's that.
basically, so basically, like this new model is going to reshore like continue that narrative of like AI is healthy, the market's
Exactly.
healthy, you're
So
going
NVIDIA
well,
does it on
adoption's still there,
on
there's still
the
more room to
investment
grow.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Gemini does it on the tech side. So
And there's healthy competition and there's stuff happening basically.
it's, yeah, still
Yeah.
improving. There's still runway on both. So I think that just means like it's only going to be somewhat shallow pullback. I mean, shallow could mean 20%, but it's, we're not going to get any major pullbacks beyond that. Well, who knows what Trump's going to do? Who knows all that
I
kind of
mean,
stuff. But I
yeah.
mean, not a sector specific thing. This is not imploding. This is not the popping of the bubble. There's no sign of that, and we probably have another 6 months of runway where people are then going to be like waiting for the next releases to come out, and then see, are they still improving or are they not improving, and is NVIDIA still beating expectations or not beating, like, so we still have this runway ahead based on the news of the last couple of days.
Okay, interesting. All right, so I guess we'll see what happens when Gemini actually releases their new model out to the public. I'm like, I haven't heard anything about this other than from you, and that's what prompted me to look into it. So I'm excited to see like what it can actually do. I know that we keep a very close eye on the predictive AI side, on the ad stuff, not so much the generative AI, but I'm sure once it comes out that we're going to notice a difference on our side with our clients as well. But
Yeah.
no, that's really interesting. Yeah, no, I
And
appreciate
just
the
one,
insight.
one last thing in terms of the capabilities, like such a basic thing, like for example, I saw somebody say, look, you can say, um, create a room, give me an image of a room that looks like this style, whatever, with a
Great.
clock that says 12 p.m. And it also has a banner that says my company name. And also there's a person sitting there who's smiling and blah, 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 whatever. And
Mhm.
it's doing all of these things correctly.
Yeah,
Previously, it would be like, you can ask for one of those, maybe
yeah,
two
but good luck.
instead if you're lucky, if you
Yeah.
do it a whole bunch of times. But like now it's like, oh, the clock's right, the person's accurate, the all the things you asked about the room are accurate, the banner is, the text is accurate, like, right? So like this is like, again, like, okay, are we wowed by that? I mean, not necessarily. It should be able to do that in theory, like you're asking for it to do it, it's doing it. But like in practice, it's actually more reliable on that. I mean, hallucinations notwithstanding, in reality, it seemed, or in like real use cases, just basic stuff, it is more reliable than it was, at least in terms of what we've seen from people who have access to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, oh, you're talking about the new the Gemini
Gemini,
model, because like already I know, like playing, just me playing around with Nano Banana, I've been pretty impressed with the accuracy of it understanding what to retain and what it wants me to replace. Whereas that's one of the problems that we always had in the past with like Sora or Midjourney. Midjourney had to create a user experience tool where you could highlight what you wanted to replace, and even then it was still kind of hit or miss. That was one of the things I was really impressed with when it came to Nano Banana, understanding my text prompt and only doing the thing that I wanted to do and not touching the rest of it. That was quite good. So if the new model is even better than that, then yeah, I can definitely see how it's like it's another big step towards getting rid of that hallucination thing and making it closer and closer to something that people can rely on. But I still question whether or not that translates to productivity in a way that people are either willing to pay for it or it brings value, whether it brings value to businesses that are willing to pay for it or people's personal lives where it's doing more than just creating fun AI slop, right? I think that's where I'm not sure if there's like a good alignment of like what the investors are seeing versus how people are using it and the value that people are seeing. Like I think that's for me where the disconnect is.
oh yeah, for sure. And so on that, the whole AI slop thing, it's like, well, okay, but are using the AI slop right now. The demand is there for the AI slop, and if we get to the point where,
For now, yeah.
for now, yeah, yeah. If we get to the point, I mean, again, the number one use case is therapy, according to some research, right? So like AI slop therapy, but like it's not like, oh, I'm just creating an image and that's cool, and then I won't do it again, right? It's more like people are daily or weekly using these things in that way, right? So that's where the demand is. If we get to a point where this is like 100% reliable for in a professional setting to create video and image content, then like usage has like another big jump, right? Because suddenly
Mhm.
all of these people who were not using it for that will use it for that. So this is all opportunity rather than risk, in terms of like, oh, it's not good enough, therefore like everything's going to fall apart. It's like more like, no, it's a little bit better. Is it there yet for those people? Maybe not. But
So
like,
so your argument is like as it's increased in capability, it's becoming more useful for more people. And I definitely see that because like even us, right? Like we went from no, the AI stuff is just terrible to now it's like, well, it's good enough for this and it's good enough for this. And as long as we keep an eye on it, it does this pretty well and it saves us time, it saves us money. And like at least at Drive, we've definitely started like from the beginning, we've always been very AI focused. But now more than ever on the generative AI side, like our designers are using it, our videography team is using it, like I'm using it, we're using it more and more integrated into our daily processes. And yeah, as we've seen that capability move up, we've definitely been throwing more things at it and we're willing to pay for it. But I don't know that we're the typical case. Like I still see a lot of people that are only sticking to free models. I see a lot of people that are not using it for production work or they're not using it the way that would align them with the amount of value that the investors are seeing.
yeah,
So I
I mean,
think
I
that
think, again, bringing it back to the .com thing, like there was a period of time where the early adopters were like, okay, I see the future. I see how this is going to be used by everyone, right? I see how, like, yeah, it sucks to use dial up and it sucks to, but like these things will get better, it'll get easier. And then everyone will be doing e-commerce or whatever it is, right? We didn't know about social media and these things at that point, but like, we're I think we're past that point now where it's like, I don't think these capabilities have to get significantly better for it to be valuable for most people. It's just you need to implement them in a way that works for people, or that is accessible or easy enough for them.
True.
Um, and I bought into that. Maybe not everyone buys into that. But the other thing is the kind of capabilities that we're getting closer to, and that even if it's used for only a small number of people, like we were talking about, creating these graphics and videos and things like that versus text responses. We're getting closer to a point where, and Jensen Huang of NVIDIA and others have been talking about this for years now, of like, this is where we're going. It's like, you will be, you'll want to use like the future of like using a phone or a computer will be uh, everything's generated on the fly. Like you don't, like you have this kind of very light OS, but like your software is being generated.
It's just intuitive and just organic, and it's just reacting to you
It's
in
just
real.
it's just like the whole thing is like, you need to, it's kind of predicting or understanding you want to do this, and therefore it's generating the thing that you need to accomplish that task in real time. And I think we're
Future.
starting to see the signs of that with just like one prompt, and here's the website that teaches you how to learn this one thing, or here's the app that helps you do the one thing just for right now. This, as we get closer to that, and I think we're going to get closer to that because the value would be there if that's actually possible, and it looks like it's going to be possible. Like, just imagine how much data center usage that would be. Again, are people going to pay for it, and who's paying for it in the meantime? That's kind of a question, but I'm pretty confident that the value will be there. And as you said, like, they can just turn on ads and like everyone will just shut up like the day after, because how much money can OpenAI make on ads? Like, it's probably, I mean, maybe not as much as Google, but like they would make a huge
That
amount of money, and then people would say like, $13 billion run rate. No, maybe $130 billion run rate, maybe $200 billion run rate. Like, run rate. I think like that's just a thing they could just turn on, right? And
that
all of these
that's the
companies could do that.
existential. Yeah, that's the existential threat that Google sees, right? Because for marketers like us, it comes down to where are the eyeballs and where are the conversions. If OpenAI is able to launch an ad platform that converts better for the same amount or cheaper than what would pay Google, budgets will just shift, and Google could overnight lose their lunch. And I think that's what they're seeing as the threat, and that's why, to me, that's why they're making these moves. But other than ads, I struggle to see where the use case is from a business standpoint for them to justify the investment. And I
But
think
ads
that's
are not
where
the use
I
case.
can't.
Ads are the monetization. The use case
Yeah,
is what people is the AI slop that you're talking about, right? So the
that's not a
use
good
case
use
is that
case.
it should, but no,
That's a
well, I
terrible
mean, it
use
is
case.
a use case. It just means people find value in that, even
Yeah.
though others are saying it's AI slop, right? So, but it means that like they can monetize those use cases, that even if people are not willing to pay for the AI slop, they can still monetize it, right? And they can wait to monetize the real thing, the real valuable thing, or whatever that ends up being, professional use or whatever, um, later. And that can be another tier of revenue for all of these companies. So, until we get to a point where it's like unclear, or they already turned monetization on and actually it's not, growing as fast, or, they've hit some sort of ceiling in the cost per click, or whatever the metric is, that's the sign that like, okay, and they're not able, and then they have like 2-3 tiers of pricing, and, they're not growing that. Like, that's I guess a reason why OpenAI probably won't IPO, because they don't want to talk about all this stuff publicly, probably, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, and even the big tech companies, they don't have to be so clear about this stuff because it's still tiny relative to their other businesses. So we're not getting that full picture, and we won't for some time. But I think that's all runway, right? We're still in the Facebook 2000 and, I don't know, 2008, or I don't know when
I don't
Facebook
remember.
whatever, but like the
Yeah.
timeline of like pre-revenue, like, they're still in the, let's capture this, let's capture the world in terms of getting users. um we're still in that picture, And you could have said back then, it's so, I mean, I don't want to use that as an argument because it's different industries. And we know now social media is a thing that has value because of advertising. But I believe that it's pretty clear that that these AI tools like ChatGPT have at least as much value, and I would say probably significantly more value. So that if you if you just monetize it with ads, it's going to be a bigger business than social media. And I think it's going to be like 10x that at least in terms of all the other use cases and ability to monetize beyond just ads.
Okay, that's a fair point. Well, again, like I appreciate that. I think like you make a very strong argument that this is not just a bubble, that this is just a normal part of the boom cycle. And like, yeah, I see where you're coming from. It definitely makes a lot of sense. I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens with the new Gemini model coming up, and I guess we'll see, and then we'll probably have like another chat, and I'll get your thoughts again.
Sounds good. Fun conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching. If you found it interesting or helpful, please follow us on social media. It really helps us out. For more information about how we help companies with their marketing and technology, data, AI, visit our website, drivemarketing.ca. We're always happy to hear from people. We're always happy to help people out.